Quentin Tarantino now doubling down tonight on the comments that launched a police boycott of his upcoming film, The Hateful Eight. Joining me now is David Klinger, a professor of criminology, justice, former police officer, and author of Into the Kill Zone, and also with me, CNN political commentator, Mr. Marc Lamont Hill. Hello, gentlemen. So, Mark, you said this last night. You said that you don't think Tarantino went far enough. You said you wished that he had named names. Well, he did tonight, and he is standing up to his critics. Let's hear some of it.
I was under the impression I was an American and that I had First Amendment rights, and there was no problem with me going to an anti-police brutality protest and speaking my mind. And just because I was at an anti-police brutality protest doesn't mean I'm anti-police. And basically, there was a lot of people at that rally, and we were all crying for a lot of things, but there was one thing in particular, which was stop shooting unarmed people. We want justice, but stop shooting unarmed people. But they don't want to deal with that. They would rather start arguments with celebrities than examine the concerns put before them by a citizenry that has lost trust in them.
Is that what you wanted to hear, Mark?
That's exactly what I wanted to hear. First, I wanted to hear him name names. One, because I think people who go around shooting unarmed people should be named and spotlighted, but also because it allows us to target the population of law enforcement officers who are actually the problem. If you don't want to blanket everybody, you name names, and I think that's helpful. Tarantino wasn't saying all police officers are murderers. He was saying some are, and we need to deal with it. And once again, I think the bigger problem here is that police officers have operated with such impunity forever in America that when you critique them at all, when you go to an anti-police brutality rally, it's made to believe that you are anti-police, when in fact, you're just anti-brutality.
So, David, I want you to weigh in on this because last night Harry Hawk, who's a former New York City police detective, said it is really a fallacy to say that police officers can't shoot unarmed people if they feel threatened. So what do you make of what he said, of what Tarantino's responded to tonight, what he said?
Well, first of all, when he talks about the First Amendment, the state is not coming in and arresting him. He is exercising his First Amendment right. And it drives me nuts that someone as educated as he is and as a high-profile individual as he is doesn't understand what the First Amendment is. You have an absolute right to say whatever the heck you want, and the government can't stop it. But other people have an absolute right in their First Amendment and the rest of the Bill of Rights to not associate, so on and so forth. So that's a canard, and he should know better. The second thing is, in terms of the issue of shooting unarmed people, doesn't happen very often, and most of the time when it does, once the evidence comes out, it's clear that what the officer did was correct. There are times and places where officers shoot unarmed people, and it's absolutely wrong. And so for the best example is the situation in South Carolina, in North Charleston. But let me give you an example of a justifiable shooting an unarmed individual. A police officer is pinned down, an individual has him around the throat, and he's punching him in the face, fracturing his eye socket and his cheekbone. Is the officer supposed to sit there, lie there, and take it? Absolutely not. The standard for using deadly force against someone is not whether they have a gun or a knife or are unarmed. It's, is there a reasonable belief that their life is in imminent jeopardy or the life of another innocent? And so shooting unarmed people is a legitimate police option if and only if, however, there is a reasonable belief, not just I think maybe, but a reasonable belief, objectively reasonable, that someone's life is in jeopardy.
Okay,
that's the issue.
For more harsh words from his police critics, here's what else he said.
They want to demonize me. They want to slander me, imply that I'm saying things that I didn't say. And for what reason? The reason is because they want me to shut up, and they want to make sure that no other people like me, prominent citizens, will stand up for that side.
Mark, what do you make of that?
I mean, I think there is a kind of bullying that happens when people have the courage and sometimes even audacity to stand up and challenge police brutality, and in some neighborhoods, police terrorism. I think that's a key issue here. And I agree that there are moments based on the law where police have the option and maybe even a duty to protect themselves, even when the person is unarmed. For example, in the case that was painted where someone's on the ground, punching someone in the face, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That could be a circumstance. Obviously, in the case of Trayvon Martin, it's a little more complicated, but police absolutely do have that option. But I disagree with the idea that there is some objective, reasonable standard at which we can say you can kill a person. And here's why it's problematic. Because the notion of the reasonable man standard is invoked by jurists. It's invoked by everyday citizens. And everyday citizens have biases. In other words, a jury may say, yes, in the same circumstance, I would have shot Trayvon Martin. Yes, in the same circumstance, I would have shot Michael Brown. The problem is, oftentimes, we are shaped by white supremacy. We are shaped by fear of black bodies. So just because a jury of people have the same irrational white supremacist fear of black people doesn't mean that it's okay to shoot them. It may be legal, but it's not okay. And that's part of what we're trying to do. We're trying to unlearn some of these things.
Mark, the constitutional standard in Graham versus Connor says objectively reasonable. And if you want to argue with the Supreme Court, that's fine. But that's
what I'm doing. Yes,
Okay.
I'm disagreeing with the law. I'm saying that the law is not engineered at its core to deal with this fundamental issue of white supremacy. That's what I'm saying. Yes, I agree with you.
How did white supremacy come in here? Because the situation I'm talking about was a white officer in Kansas City who killed a white guy who was in the process of pummeling him.
Right, but the issue that I'm talking about was Quentin Tarantino talking about the death of black bodies, and I'm saying that is the overarching issue. There are moments where police use excessive force against white people, absolutely, but I'm saying as an example of where the law where the law is inadequate is a case where juries and police officers invoke a reasonable man's standard to decide to kill a person, not because they wake up in the morning saying I want to go kill a black person. I think they're reasonably afraid of black people, but the reasonable fear of black people is itself an artifact of white supremacy.
You're not saying
And
that all
sometimes
police
black people
officers
do it.
are
Black people shoot black people too.
Mark, but you're not saying all police officers are afraid of black people.
No, I'm not saying all police officers are afraid of black people, and I'm not saying all people are afraid of black people. I'm saying we see cases where this does become a fact, and it's black people who are afraid of black people, it's white people who are afraid of black people, and I'm saying both of those things are artifacts of white supremacy, and they're a problem.
Okay, David, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, the issue, however, is not just that someone doesn't like black people or is afraid of black people. The issue before a jury is, can the officer articulate a standard to say, I was in reasonable fear for my life, not measured against racism, this, that, and everything, but measured against what the law says. And if you say, I was afraid of him because he stood there and said he was going to beat me, and so I shot him, that's not objectively reasonable. If you're pinned on the ground and someone is pummeling you, black, white, Asian, male, female, it doesn't matter. Any reasonable person would look at that assault and say, that person was trying to kill a cop, and the officer was justified in shooting. That's all I'm trying to say, Mark.
Okay.
I hear you. I
Thank
disagree.
you.
We can talk later.
That's it. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Great conversation.
Pleasure.
Coming up, U.S. intelligence